On what day of the week did Jesus die on? Hi everyone, I'm Matthew Vandrails, one of the community pastors at Founded in Truth Fellowship. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and when you subscribe, click that little bell to be notified whenever we post new content or go live every week with our weekly church services. Also, feel free to comment below. We would love to hear your thoughts about this topic. Also, if you do feel a desire to click that dislike button, well, we won't think any less of you. I promise. In this Fitbit, we are going to look at what day of the week Jesus died on, according to the Bible, that is. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why is this even a debate? I mean, everybody knows Jesus died on Friday. Well, the Friday view is the most popular, and it is also the one that has held the longest in Christian history. But the issue is, the Bible never actually tells us what day Jesus died on, specifically, that is. Because of this, the Friday view has been derived from some of the details concerning Jesus' death, which we will look at in a moment. However, the same details about Yeshua's death have given rise to another view, the Wednesday view. Wednesday, yes, Wednesday. There is actually a view derived from the Bible that Jesus died not on Friday, but on Wednesday. So we're going to take a look at both of the views, talk about the high points, maybe talk about some weak points in the views as well. So, the Wednesday view. The Wednesday view is actually based off of Jesus' own prophecy. See, in Matthew chapter 12, some of the scribes and the Pharisees, they wanted a sign from Jesus. Show us a sign. And here is what Jesus says. This is how he responds. Then some of the scribes and Pharisees told Jesus, "Teacher, we want to see a sign from you." But he replied to them, "An evil and adulterous generation craves a sign, yet no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Because just as Jonah was in the stomach of the sea creature for 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights." So, right here, Jesus says the only sign he's going to give is the sign of Jonah, where he will be buried in the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. So the idea goes that if Jesus meant what he said, then he would have died Wednesday evening and risen from the dead sometime Saturday night or early on the first day of the week, early Sunday morning, as Mark 16:9 and John 20:1 says. This would be the sign of Jonah fulfilled. Now, one of the biggest criticisms to this view is that even though the text does not say what day he died on, it does state Jesus died as the Sabbath was beginning, which would normally be Friday evening. However, because we know it was the time of Passover, John specifically emphasizes the Sabbath could have been the start of the biblical feast of the week of unleavened bread, which also is a Sabbath as well. John 19:31. The Jews therefore, because it was the preparation that the bodies should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day was a high day, sought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. Now, pointing this verse out is important for the Wednesday view because according to Mark 16, the women who came to the tomb on Sunday went out and bought spices to anoint Yeshua's body. Mark 16:1. When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. So the very next verse here states that it was very early in the morning, while it was still dark according to John. So the assumption is that they didn't have time to actually buy the spices after the Sabbath had ended. And we know they couldn't have bought them on the Sabbath day because no shops would have been open. That and it would have been a violation of the Sabbath observances, specifically in the first century. The Wednesday view resolves this by asserting that there were 2 Sabbaths in this week period. One on Thursday, and the women bought spices on Friday after the Sabbath, but before the weekly Sabbath. And then the weekly Sabbath was, of course, on Saturday. And they came with the spices Sunday morning to anoint him. Now, some would say that this view reads a bit too far into Mark's assertion that the ladies bought spices. But that's one of the bigger reasons, on top of the literal interpretation of the sign of Jonah that Jesus spoke about, that the Wednesday view has become pretty popular. Now, the Friday view, the traditional Friday view. The Friday view, however, takes a hard look at the 3 days and 3 nights language used throughout the gospel accounts and in the writings of Paul. It acknowledges that yes, Jesus said he would be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights, just like Jonah in Matthew 12. But the Friday view also acknowledges Matthew recording that Jesus would rise up on the 3rd day as well. In Matthew 16:21, it states, "From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the 3rd day be raised." So, Matthew 12 states that he will be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. But Matthew 16, Jesus says he will rise on the 3rd day. And there's even a third distinct way that Matthew phrases this event over in Matthew 27. Matthew 27, verse 62. "The next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. They said, 'Sir, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days, I will rise again.'" Mark also records this phrase, after 3 days, being spoken by Yeshua himself in Mark chapter 8, verse 31. "And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again." So which is it? 3 days and 3 nights? After 3 days? Or will he rise on the 3rd day? The most compelling argument for the Friday view is actually found in Luke chapter 24, in the story of the road to Emmaus, where we find some of the followers of Jesus disappointed, and they're traveling home from Jerusalem after Jesus was killed. They came to Jerusalem expecting a different type of birthing of God's kingdom on earth, and were pretty disappointed to see their master taken away and killed. Unbeknownst to them, though, Jesus started walking beside them, talking to them, and they didn't even recognize him. They even went on to complain to him about how disappointed they were. Luke 24:21. "But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things happened." As they are walking home Sunday morning, Jesus joined them, being risen from the dead, and they declared that Sunday morning was the 3rd day since he was crucified, which would indicate a Friday death. Now, there are other views out there concerning the day when Jesus died. A less popular view that seeks to iron out a few of the other details on the viewing of when Jesus died is a Thursday view. Something that the Friday view does have going for it, though, is the weight of historical tradition. We find evidence that the earliest Christian communities, those closest to the generation of the apostles, held the Friday view. Here we have a quote from Justin Martyr. Justin Martyr is a Christian, or was a Christian apologist from the 2nd century CE, about a generation after the apostles. And he's explaining in his letter why the majority of Christian communities hold worship services on Sunday, to which for them it inaugurated the resurrection of Jesus and the birth of new creation on the 1st day of the week. And here is what he says. "But Sunday is the day of which all hold our common assembly, because it is the first day on which God, having wrought a change in the darkness and matter, made the world. And Jesus Christ, our Savior, on the same day rose from the dead. For he was crucified on the day before that of Saturn, Saturday, and on the day after that of Saturn, which is the day of the sun, Sunday. Having appeared to his apostles and disciples, he taught them these things, which we have submitted to you also for your consideration." Justin Martyr, the First Apology, chapter 67. So here we see, sometime in the 2nd century, the Christian communities had accepted and held the Friday view. Now, Does it really matter what day Yeshua died on? Well, I suppose you could argue it, but I would rather spend time arguing that the most important thing is that he died. And not only that, he rose from the dead. And not only that, sin and death and the enslavement of all of mankind was defeated. That is the most important thing. The fact that Yeshua mentions the Jonah story is actually extremely significant. Yes, Jesus said that he would be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights, just like Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights. But let's take a step back. What came from Jonah being in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights? See, Yeshua is arguing with a generation that is unrepentant, and they were critical about the message of the gospel of God's kingdom that Yeshua preached. The story of Jonah is the story of Jonah being swallowed by a whale, and even in the story, Jonah himself equates him being dead or in the grave. Jonah comes forth from the whale, aka from the grave or Sheol, and the result is that through him being in the whale, the message of God's mercy reaches the lost city of Nineveh, and salvation engulfs the community there. So we have to be careful not to minimize the sign of Jonah. It's more than simply a sign of 3 days and 3 nights. The scope of what Yeshua is saying here is huge. He's saying that the only sign he's going to give is that he's going to die. And through his death, salvation is going to come, and God's mercy is going to engulf even those who we would think are too far from God to ever be saved, just like the Ninevites. That is the power of God's love. So, in summary, a Wednesday death is usually a view that is primarily supported with taking a high literal view of Matthew 12:40, where Jesus says he would be dead for 3 days and 3 nights, just like Jonah was in the belly of the whale. A Friday view takes Matthew 12:40 a bit more loosely due to Matthew also recording Jesus saying that he would rise from the dead on the 3rd day as well as after 3 days. And of course, taking the Road to Emmaus story as a solidifying point in the argument. When the Passover season comes every single year, the most important thing we as believers need to realize, just like the original Passover, is that the blood of the Lamb ushered in a freedom from slavery. Unlike the original Passover, though, it was not just a lamb. It was Yeshua laying down his life in the face of death. And it is through his blood that we are freed, not from slavery to Pharaoh and Egypt, but to slavery to sin and death. It is through this freedom that the kingdom of God is birthed, and we enter into life everlasting as a new creation through Christ our King. Guys, if you enjoyed this message, go ahead, give us a like in the video. If you didn't, feel free to dislike, if you must. Please let us know what you thought in the comments below. We read every single comment, so let us know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. When you subscribe, hit that little bell to be notified with new uploads and when we go live with our weekly live stream from our fellowship every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Remember guys, stay fit, stay founded in truth. We'll see you next time.